say remix.
What's going on, guys? Welcome back to United View and welcome back to another edition of the Tactical View, a special World Cup Qatar 2022 edition. And, Cam, today we're going to be talking about an England victory, opening their World Cup campaign with a 6-2 win over Iran. Let's get straight into this, Cam. Okay, coming into the game, what were we expecting? What was Gareth Southgate expecting from our opponents?
I think as you quite often see when you face lesser teams, you expect them to sit back in a deep block, and that's how Iran started the game. 5-4-1. We expected them not really to have too much threat in terms of coming out and trying to play, but to try and sit in, try and get to 60 minutes at 0-0 and just play for a point. If they get a goal along the way, if you can scrap something from a set piece or get a lucky penalty towards the end, you never know what can happen. But didn't work for Iran, and that was thanks in most part to a fantastic tactical setup from England.
Yeah, that was going to be my next point, actually, talking about how did we counterbalance that then. Okay, very obvious what they were going to be going to do, but then it's up to Southgate and his team to proactively beat that quickly, and they did that pretty successfully.
Exactly. So when you face a team that are setting up in a deep block, the main objective obviously is to try and protect their goal, and the way they do that is by controlling the space in the centre of the pitch here. So if they're going to control that space, your job as an attacking team is to try and stop that happening. And the ways you do that, number one, you create width. So you need players on either side to make sure that these defenders on either side have got something to think about. If you can stretch them out a little bit, you create more space in the centre. So width is one principle. Option two, or Principle two, is depth, so you need to stretch them that way as well, so that the gaps between the lines open up and you can get players into the spaces. You get Mount, Jude Bellingham, Saka, Raheem Sterling into those gaps between the lines. And option three, the important thing is that when you get the ball in central areas, you've got to be quick, you've got to be incisive with your passes, and you've got to be hot with everything you do. Touch has to be perfect, you've got to take advantage of the spaces and the gaps when they appear, and of course, when you get into the box, you've got to put the chance away, touch and finish, back of the net. That's really, really important.
Yeah, and when we were talking about it before the game, actually, a concern that I think I had, particularly going up against these low blocks, the worst thing you can do, United do it all the time, by the way, of moving the ball around slowly. You've got to be quick, you've got to be proactive. And in fairness to Southgate and in fairness to England today, they were really quick with it. I think you looked at, obviously, the amount of space that people like Saka and Sterling got on the wing. You look at people in the middle, like Bellingham and Rice, moved the ball quickly. Harry Kane dropped deep enough as well. Amazing playing with his back to goal. And it just, like you said, it just stretched them open. And that low block that Iran clearly were attempting to do, after 15, 20 minutes, it was already done.
Exactly, and I think one of the things that we've seen in the Premier League in recent seasons, which now seems to have transferred itself a bit more to international football, is that obviously a lot of teams tend to defend with a back four. So teams that are going to attack that and try and break that down tend to try to create a front five, whether that's by the wingers joining, whether that's the way City do it, where they've got two of their more advanced midfielders joining in the half spaces to create a front five. That's something that most teams try to do to outnumber the last line of the defence. And England tried to do that today. So obviously we've got 5 at the back here, so we had to try and get 6 in that line to try and outnumber them. And the way we tried to create that was it was quite nuanced, actually, depending on the different skill sets of the different players. Yeah. So obviously on the left side here, rather than Sterling holding the width, he's the sort of player that you need in between the width of the penalty box, really. You want him sort of as a central threat as much as possible. So he tucked in there, and we had Luke Shaw providing the width on the left-hand side. He was fantastic, obviously being left-footed, had those natural passing angles, natural crossing angles from that position. But because he was able to overlap and provide the width there, Sterling was able to come in here and operate in this space here. And what that does is for the right back here, the right wing back gives him a choice. You've got one guy outside you, one guy on the inside. Which one do you go and try and defend? So that makes it hard there. Then you've got Harry Kane in here somewhere. On the opposite side, because Saka is generally for Arsenal more of a touchline winger, he stays really wide. So rather than Sterling tucking in, Saka held the width on this side, and the way we reacted to that was Mason Mount sometimes was in these spaces, sometimes it was Harry Kane that tucked in there, sometimes it was Jude Bellingham, and sometimes also Kieran Trippier underlapping. But it was really interesting, and I like the nuance there of, on this side, because Sterling is good coming inside here and Luke Shaw is good on the overlap, the width was held that way round, whereas it's the opposite way round this side, because Saka's good on the touchline, good at getting at his man 1v1, and therefore we had Trippier able to sort of invert there, sometimes Jude Bellingham coming forward to get into those spaces there. So the way it created there, sort of a front six, you've got Saka, Bellingham, Kane, Mount, Sterling and Luke Shaw, all looking to sort of overwhelm that back line, and that gives us the numerical advantage, makes things a bit easier for us to get in behind, and as we said, in terms of breaking that low block, we've got the width there, We've got the depth there because we've got the defensive line, then we've got sort of Rice and Trippier in front, and then we've got the back line there, also the front line overwhelming the Iran back line in terms of numbers. And from there, the important bit really is that when you get the opportunity to get the ball into wide areas, into these areas, there's not much space, so your touch has to be crisp. You've got to move the ball quickly, create triangles, create rotations. Sometimes Saka will get it, drive inside there, Bellingham would maybe go in behind, and Trippier would come and overlap out here. It was nice to see those rotations happening, and it worked really well in terms of breaking that Iran defence down. And what was, I think, really important as well was that because England were, in terms of individual quality, in so many positions, so superior to Iran, what you often saw was that, let's say, Cheshmi here, the central centre-back for Iran, wasn't confident in dealing with Harry Kane by himself. And you see the amount of joy Harry Kane had in terms of flick-ons, in terms of getting the ball around the corner and bringing others into play. That drags Hosseini, it drags, I'm not even going to try and say that, drags the other centre-back narrower as well, which forces the wing-backs inside. And that gives England even more space in the wide areas to link up our combinations and get things working. Drags other Iranian players even deeper, and it makes it really tough for Iran to play and really tough for Iran to defend.
Yeah, and I think if you look at, it's really interesting the points you're making there, because immediately you can see Luke Shaw up the top there. How do we get that first goal? Overlap, ball into the box, and then there's space for Bellingham to come in. You look at Saka there, what's he got? Space on the right-hand side. How did he get his goals? If you look at the goals he scored today, we were shocked the amount of room he had, but to your point, it's because that entire back four is actually being squeezed to pretty much the length of the penalty box.
Yeah, because they're worried about Kane. So that's where you've got the tactical organisation of England creating the width, creating the 6v5 on the last line there, but then you've also got the technical side as well, with Harry Kane being so good that the other Iran players are worried about him, so they're getting narrower as a result, giving us more space in the wide areas. So that's something where tactically, yes, it may well work in the same way against the USA or Wales, but in terms of technical side, maybe because they won't be as worried about Harry Kane, centre-backs will be a bit wider, so there'll be a bit less space and time in the wide areas. So it just means you have to execute those things that little bit better.
Yeah.
The other point I wanted to make in terms of attacking points from England was that it was fantastic the way that we saw Kane and Sterling try to get across their men when we got balls into the box. So if Shaw's in this sort of crossing position, we saw Kane and Sterling getting across the front of their man. So if this is Sterling's man, he's making that run, last second he pulls out in front there, Kane would do the same on his man. That sometimes created space at the back post, but more importantly, because the Iran players were worried about these guys getting in front of them, they were dropping off. If I can select the Iran players, dropping deeper. And what that created was space for the likes of Mount and Bellingham with late arriving runs, as we saw indeed for Bellingham's goal from that late run. A bit of space in the box because the Iran players were worried about the forward players from England making those runs in behind.
And he'll be so happy with that, Gareth Southgate, won't he? Because if you look at that, the way you've explained it, that is just fundamental shape work, isn't it? That is tactical. This is what we're going to bring to the table to stretch the defence, to, like you said, bring players closer to the ball and allow our players to have extra space when it comes to the width of the pitch there. And I think, again, I've been critical of Southgate, but him, Steve Holland, the entire team, they've played a blinder there.
It worked brilliantly, but it's important to remember with football, you've always got to have every layer perfect or every layer right. The tactical layer was brilliant, but if we move the ball too slowly, it doesn't matter, it doesn't work. Because by the time you've got the ball out here, the Iran defence can shift across. So it was brilliant that the tactical side was fantastic, but also technically, we did the right things in possession, did the right things out of possession, and that made a difference. The last thing I want to talk about in this tactical view is sort of our defensive organisation actually, in terms of counter-attacks. Because obviously in games like this, you do risk being hit on the break. And the defensive structure from England was actually really good as well. And what you're looking for, when in this sort of game, obviously if you've got an overload on the last line there, because you've got the 6v5, you're going to have an underload somewhere else. So the place we had the underload was this midfield line. But in terms of Iran's counter-attacking threat, we knew we were going to pin them back for most of the game. So this midfield line weren't really going to have a chance to sort of get direct runners sort of into the channels either side. So the main threat tactically was actually the long ball up to Taremi. And the way we dealt with that for the majority of the first half, the first sort of 50 minutes, was that we created this shape around him. It was more a box, so we had Stones and Maguire behind him. We had Rice and then sometimes Bellingham if he hadn't pushed on, or when he had pushed on, we had Kieran Trippier in there as well. Yeah. So obviously what that creates then is that little box there, meaning that pretty much any ball that is played forward from the Iranian players, the England players are going to get there first. So what that does is it forces Iran then, rather than playing long balls out to Taremi as their out ball, because it's going to get swept up straight away. They've got to try and play combinations through midfield. And what that means then is that the counter press from England can be initiated straight after we lose it. So it means that if they win the ball in this sort of area, for example, because they've got to play through midfield, you've got a great chance for Luke Shaw to nip in here, Sterling to nip in here, Mason Mount to nip back in there. And actually, it's turned an initial attack followed by a chance for Iran to get out into another attack for England, potentially even more dangerous because the Iranian players are thinking about breaking forward. Their mindset's on how can we get out, how can we go and score a goal ourselves. So actually, if you win it back in these positions, Iran are even more disorganised and your counter-press ends up leading you to a great chance. So the organisation there was brilliant, and obviously at some point Iran have realised, hang on, we're not going to win the game here, we're not going to get anything out of it if we keep doing this. So they switched, and there was a sub involved and they went to more of a 5-3-2. Now we did see when that happened them getting a little bit more joy, because then what you can have is that if Jahanbakhsh, let's say, was sitting in the box there, then the other one can be in the channel down the side. And that means then that you've got a little bit more threat in terms of the long ball. And that's when you're then asking your centre-backs to cover larger areas of ground. And sometimes in that sort of situation, Harry Maguire can struggle because he's not the quickest over the ground. And that can be a bit of an issue. In general, didn't cause us too many problems. But it was interesting to see that obviously tactically when that shift did happen, we weren't quite as able to stop the supply from long balls. And therefore, the counter-press wasn't quite as good because they were just playing long over the top and beating it straight away.
And that was what was quite interesting, actually, because it's interesting you mentioned the change in shape from Iran in the second half, because that was noticeable at half-time. There were three substitutions immediately, so clearly they knew what they were trying to do wasn't working. And obviously Southgate will look at some of the goals conceded and be a bit frustrated with that. But this is what I love about tournament football, because obviously, just in general football, in league football, domestic football, you take game by game. But when it comes to tournament football, it really is a case-by-case basis. We were talking about this during the match, that you can have principles, and I'm sure Southgate has principles, but for instance, like today, or when we play USA Friday or Wales next week, that every single game will have a nuance to it, and you have to, because again, you've got to be cautious, but also at the same time attacking to get through to the next round. It'll be really interesting to see if he sticks with this kind of style, like you said, of on one side inverted, on the other side stretching it, or is he going to take it on a case-by-case basis, do you think?
I'm not sure, to be honest. It'll be an interesting one to see. I think we'll largely try to play the same way as this for the rest of the group games. But I think what could be interesting is that if we come up against teams that play a back four rather than a back five, obviously maybe Bellingham won't be getting forward quite so much. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see how we adapt to different games. Interesting to see sort of the different structures that come into play in each game. But one thing's for sure, we'll be here to break it down for you, whatever goes on.
Exactly.
And hope you enjoyed the video.
Exactly. There you go, guys. There's a brief tactical view for you for England's 6-2 victory over Iran. And fingers crossed we get more results like that coming forward. Be sure to smash a like on the like button. Be sure to subscribe bottom right-hand corner. Remember, you can join the UV Members Club. Links in the video description. You get your badges, your emojis, your exclusive members-only content as well. Let us know your thoughts in the comment section below. Do you agree with Cam's tactical breakdown? Do you have different opinions? Let us know in the comment section below. We'll speak to you again very soon. Peace.